The following Vatsim video has been created by AviationPro for the P1 pilot rating course of the Vatsim Pilot Training Academy. Visit academy.vatsim.net for more information. In this video we're going to take a look at charts. We're going to show you where to find charts and how to read them. Charts are very important when flying on the Vatsim network because it gives you a better idea of the situation around you, of the situation at the airport. It also gives you a good view of the route you're going to fly, of the standard instrument departure or the arrival route, for example. So having charts while you're flying is essential. So let's take a look first where we're going to find charts. A lot of pilots who are beginning to fly on the Vatsim network seem to have trouble in finding charts, but actually it's very simple. So how are we going to find charts? There are a couple of ways you can find charts. This is a very simple one. It's a website called Charts.aero. And all you have to do is enter the ICAO code of the airport. So let's say we want to get the charts from Paris. We press on search and there we go, we have all the charts of Paris. Now let's take a look at another example. We want to have the charts of New York JFK. Press on search again. And there we go, we have all the charts we need for John F. Kennedy Airport. So this is a very simple site in order to find your charts. Vatsim also has a chart finder. It's mostly for the US airports. You won't find much European airports. So let's put in, for example, Colorado Springs Airport. We have a nice map with all the charts, and they're split up in several maps again. So for the departure and for the arrival and for the approach to the runways. Now we can also use a bit more of a direct approach, but that's by visiting the website of the VAC of the country you're going to fly through. So let's take the Netherlands for example. Every VAC will have some kind of section where it says charts or pilot information. Like here we have charts, so we're going to click on that. And as you can see we have all the charts of the airports in the Netherlands. You can also go to the aeronautical information publications of the Netherlands, and via that website you can get very detailed information of the airports and also all the charts of the airports. So let's take a look. For example, we're going to go back to the Dutch VAC website. We're going to have a direct link to Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, and there's a lot of information up here about the airport. It takes some time to load, but if we go down here we're going to have a nice overview of all the charts of Amsterdam, as you can see. So this is a bit more of a direct approach. So for the people who want to have access to charts easily, you can go to Charts.aero or the Vatsim chart finder. But if you want to have the charts a bit more directly, you can go to the VAC website of your country. So when you have downloaded your charts, it's your choice what you do with them. You can either print them out and view them on paper, or you can put them on a tablet device in order to view them electronically. So now that you know how to find charts, let's take a look at how to read them. We're going to do this using a simple flight from Bratislava to Prague, 2 simple airports and a very short route. So it's wise to put all the charts in order, either electronically or on paper, so that helps you to make the flight easier and don't have to look for the charts all the time. So put them in the right order, starting from the ground charts to the departure charts, then the enroute charts, and then the arrival charts, and then the ground chart of the airport again. So let's just review them one by one. We're going to start with this ground charts over here at Bratislava. As you can see, it's just a nice representation of all the parking stands at the airport. So when you're planning to depart, you have to select one of these gates. And as you can see, it's just a few taxiways that are given here, and also the taxi stand numbers. There are some important things, the frequencies of course. Probably the first frequency you have to tune in for your clearance is 118.975 as you can see, and the apron elevation is 132 meters. So the parking docking chart is just a very nice and simple representation of the apron with all its stands. As you can see right here, per stand there's given what the critical type is. So if you're flying a 767, it's wise to go to stand 1 or to stand 2 and 3. If you're flying in smaller aircraft like the ATR 72, it's wise to go to stand 32, 33, etc. So based on this information you can select the gates when you're going to depart and begin your flight. Now there's some additional information, some notes. You will always find notes on these kind of charts, so make sure you give them a good read through. some information about the taxiways and the aprons. But just the main thing, give it a good review. Be aware of where the stands are when you depart and when you arrive especially. And using the information here, you can already determine which gates you should pick. So let's move over to the next chart. It's the aerodrome ground movement chart. Again, it's just a very simple representation of the airport with all its taxiways. Again, when you are going to depart or arrive at an airport, make sure you give those charts a good read through. Of course, when you arrive, you can expect a lot of taxiways. Like if you're going to vacate here, you're gonna expect either Foxtrot or Fire Taxiway Delta and Alpha. So make sure you are aware of where those taxiways are. And of course, this chart will help you to find your way when you depart or arrive. So just the runways right here, the taxiway names, and also the apron and the terminal. It's very simple. So let's say we're going to depart from runway 04. As you can see, this is the very short route to Prague. It starts with Berva, and of course this is the waypoint where we are going to end up when departing here from Bratislava. So this is just the SID chart. As you can see, we'll just turn it around for a little to start with this way. On the top there is some important information again. It's the standard departure chart, as you can see, and there's the transition altitude. Now, as discussed in the previous video, the transition altitude is the altitude at which you switch from the local QNH to the standard QNH of 1013 hectopascals. Now, the transition altitude is the same per airport, but it might differ from different airports. So, like here it will be 8,000 feet, but in Amsterdam it would be 3,000 feet, for example. So, the transition altitude will stay the same per airport, but it might differ with different airports. Then we have some important frequencies. Often when departing from an airport, it's likely that you have to do the handoff yourself. You're not getting ahead of by tower. You have to switch to the departure frequency yourself, so be aware of those frequencies. And of course also the ATIS information is very important, because you need to listen to the ATIS before you're going to depart. So let's turn the chart around again, and here we have the nice representation of the standard instrument departures. As you can see, it's just very simple. If we're going to fly to Berva, we're going to fly pretty much straight ahead and then turn left here to intercept this radial 356 of this VOR station, Juliet Alpha November. So again, a lot of information on this chart. Make sure you give it a good review. There is some information right here as well concerning the initial climb altitude. As you can see, for our departure, the Berva 7 Zulu, it's to 5,000 feet. And also some level restrictions for other departures. So there can always be additional information along with the departure routes, so make sure you keep that in mind. Speed restriction also very important, a max of 250 knots indicated airspeed below flight level 100 or as requested by ATC. So yeah, the departure chart, just a very good representation of the route. Make sure you have it so you know where you're going. Of course you can enter the departure route in the FMC, but as you can see there might be restrictions, altitude, speed restrictions, things like that, and it just raises your awareness of the route. Now as you can see, there are a lot of waypoints or fixes on this chart, and you have to be aware that air traffic control might always give you a direct. So if you're flying right here, he might give you a direct if possible. The air traffic controller could say direct to Berva, so you don't have to follow the entire route. So be aware and make sure you are aware of the names of the waypoints on your route, and yeah, you could always get a direct to them. So make sure you are aware of the names and that you study the charts before you're going to depart. The next chart is an enroute chart. Enroute charts are a little bit harder to find sometimes. The best thing to do is go to the aeronautical information publications of the country you're going to fly through, or in this case in Europe you can go to Eurocontrol and get your charts there. There's also a great website called SkyVector, and this is basically a very nice website which shows you the high and the low airways across the entire world. So it's a beautiful website that you could use as well if you don't want to have to search for all those enroute charts. So the enroute charts is just a very nice representation of all the airways per country. As you can see, there are a lot of airspaces which are restricted. We're just going to zoom in a little. So this is the point Berva, as you can see, where we're going to start our route. And there are some airspaces right here that are restricted for air traffic. It could be either military grounds or high mountains right here, for example. So be aware of those restricted areas. And of course, when you follow the airway perfectly, you will be fine, because the airways are designed to keep you away from those restricted areas. But at least this gives you a nice view of all the airways in the country, and you can follow your route accordingly. Then we'll move over to the enroute chart of the Czech Republic. Again, a lot of information right here, a lot of frequencies, and as you can see, this goes through lower airspace. Because our route is going through lower airspace, there are enroute charts for lower airspace and enroute charts for higher airspace. As we are going to fly through lower airspace, we pick this chart. And as you can see, if we zoom in a little, we can find our route as well. When we're going to enter the Czech Republic, we're going to be beginning right here at Otnem, and we're going to follow the M748 airway along our route. So again, you can find your route. It takes a little while to search for it, but you can find your route perfectly. And this is the, as you can see, Victor Lima Mike VOR. This is the end of our route. So this just again gives you a nice representation of all the airways that are there and that you are flying on, and also the restricted airspaces around you. So the route charts are not very important. It just raises your awareness of the country's restricted areas and also your own route. But let's move over to the arrival charts right now, because of course they are very important. So let's say runway 06 is active at Prague. As you can see, there is a standard route we have to follow in order to get there. So let's see, we have here a lot of frequencies again. The transition altitude 5,000 feet. Now of course, when arriving, you have to listen to the ATIS and determine the transition level. The transition level is the flight level at which you are going to switch from the standard QNH to the local QNH, as discussed in the previous video. But you won't find it on the chart, as it is different every day. It depends on the temperature and the air pressure, so you have to listen to the ATIS in order to get that information. So the arrival chart, again, is just a very nice representation of the route you have to follow. Of course, you will enter this in the FMC, but again, this raises your awareness of the route. As you can see, we're going to fly this way. Now basically, when you're arriving, you're going to follow this route all the way along through Akeva, this waypoint. It's the initial approach fix, and this is a fix or a waypoint at which you're going to start your approach. Be aware again of all the altitude restrictions along this route, and also the speed restrictions along this route, and you just have to fly this all the way through and to this waypoint. When there's no air traffic control available, you have to follow this standard route and then begin your transition to the approach yourself to the runway. If there is air traffic control online, you will probably get vectors at some point, so you get heading instructions and altitude instructions, things like that. But just enter the route in your flight management system and follow it along until air traffic control gives you further instructions. So again, be aware of the altitude restrictions and the speed limits as well, and it's very important. And then we'll move over to the next chart, which is our approach chart, as you can see here. It's the approach chart to runway 06, and you can determine which runway is going to be used for landing, depending on the weather, on the wind direction of course. So make sure you select the right runway when preparing your flight already. And as you can see, this is just the approach chart, and it contains a lot of information. You have to give it a good review before you go to fly. As you can see, this is the initial approach fix again, where we ended up. If there is no A to C, you will have to follow this route and just fly the transition yourself. If there is A to C, as you could see on the previous chart, it contains a dotted line right here, a dotted arrow. And as you can see, this means that when there's air traffic control line, you shouldn't fly the transition yourself. No, you should fly straight ahead on the initial approach fix heading. But air traffic control could also clear you for the transition, so you have to fly it anyways. So let's get back to this chart. We'll just go through the most important info right here. The course, this is the course to the runway for the approach. You have to enter this in the mode control panel of your aircraft. Then there's some important information right here. The frequency of the ILS, as you can see, it's 111.150. You have to enter this in the nav radios. And there are some important instructions right here regarding the missed approach procedures. As you can see, you have to track to 062 heading and climb to 4,000 feet, and radar factoring will be provided. It's very important to review the missed approach procedures because you have to know what you do when you get a go around. You could always get a go around by ATC if there's traffic on the runway or some kind of debris on the runway. You could always get a go around, so be aware of that. And this is the vertical profile for the ILS approach. As you can see, a 3-degree glide all the way down. Right here we have to determine the minimas and also some more information regarding the speeds, the altitudes, and at what rate of descent you have to descend per airspeed. So again, a lot of information on this chart. Just review it from the top to the bottom and you'll be fine. If you have any questions, you could always call in for help, of course, but if you just review it carefully and take some time to read all those charts, you will be fine, because actually all the information that is stated on the charts is very simple and logical. So we'll move over to the ground chart again, just like at the previous airport. It's very simple. When you're arriving, be aware that there are certain taxiways you can't vacate on. Like here, if you're landing at runway 06, you can't vacate at Charlie, make the turn, but it's more wise to vacate via the Bravo taxiway right here. So give this chart a good review at your arrival, because you have to be aware of all the taxiways out there. You're going to be at high speed, you're going to be leaving the runway at pretty high speed, and you don't have any idea where you're going. So make sure you study the taxiways, be aware where they are and how they are called, and then you'll be fine. Then we'll move over to the last chart. This is just the parking docking chart again. There are different charts per aircraft type, as you can see right here on the bottom. So you can determine already a little bit which gate is probably going to be used for you. There are Schengen gates. Schengen, of course, are the countries where you can travel across the borders for free without a passport check. So there are, at most airports in Europe, there are Schengen terminals and non-Schengen terminals. So if you're going to fly within one of the Schengen countries, like here, you're probably going to get, of course, a gate on this terminal. If you're going to fly from one of the non-Schengen countries, of course, you're going to be getting a gate at the non-Schengen terminal. So as you can see, you can do a lot of preparation again. This will help you make your flight easier and find your gate easier when you're going to land at the airport. So now that we've gone through IFR charts for an IFR flight, let's take a quick look at VFR charts. This is just a chart from Rotterdam Airport in the Netherlands. As you can see, it contains a lot of landmarks and also the arrival and departure routes. So a VFR chart doesn't contain a lot of fixes, but it contains fixes over visible landmarks that air traffic control requests you to fly over, and also in some cases report that waypoint when you're flying over it, so the air traffic controller knows where you are and which route you're going to be using. So also an arrival and departure route, just like the IFR chart, but then with visible landmarks using as a reference. So a lot of information again, just give it a good read through. Now when flying VFR, of course, if you're doing cross-country VFR flying, there are certain airspaces you have to avoid, and you can use Unruh VFR charts for that. Those Unruh VFR charts are a bit hard to get. You can buy them in a pilot store to get real-world ones, which is great fun, of course, because it's very realistic. If you want to go freeware, using SkyVector again is a great website, because you can have a world VFR of all the airspaces and also the visible landmarks using on your flights. Now in Europe, it's just a little basic overview of all the cities and landmarks, as you can see. But if we're going to move over to the US, we have here full coverage of real VFR Unruh charts. So that's, of course, contains a lot of information that you could use, and it makes VFR flying easier. And then another quick chart we're going to take a look at. This is just a VFR circuit flight. If you're going to fly circuits, just touch and goes, for example, this is a nice chart that also contains all the landmarks around you that you have to follow in order to fly the circuit perfectly. So thanks for watching this video here on the Vatsim Pilot Training Academy. We hope this video will help you understand charts a little bit better. As you can see, it is pretty simple, but you just need to take some time in order to read them, review them from the top to the bottom, and this will help you make your flights much easier And of course, it makes you help to understand what you're doing much better. In the next video, we're going to take a look at how to connect to the Vatsim network for the first time. So we will see you on the next video, and good luck with flying on Vatsim.